Okay, great. Thanks. Hey, Cam.
Hi, Dan.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Maybe just a two-part question to begin with is how happy were you to hear the plan and have hockey back as a possibility? But I guess how miffed, like maybe some Bruins fans, were you to see the round-robin seeding format up at the top?
Yeah, well, like everybody, excited to at least get to the next, what you want to call it, phase where, the players and owners have agreed upon a format on return to play. And hopefully soon we'll be able to get our facility open on a voluntary basis for the players to come in and use. Obviously a little disappointed with what the team was able to accomplish the first 70 games and then the kind of the point spread that we had between not only the teams in the league, but the teams in our division or conference. So, to kind of maybe have 3 games dictate where we fall in the conference standings is somewhat disappointing. But, the fact remains these are uncharted times for everybody, and we're just hoping we can eventually get back on the ice and play meaningful hockey games.
Were you kind of like, yay, and then, oh, dang it?
Well, I was involved with some discussions with the league on the format, listening to what some of the options were. I expressed my feelings about where I was headed, but for the good of the game, this is what they thought was best. I know they talked about some competitive games while the play-in rounds were going, but from my perspective, I felt that the players would be amped up and ready to go, regardless if they were round-robin games or games to get ready for the playoffs, knowing that other teams were playing competitive games.
Thanks, Cam. Steve Conroy, your line's open. Go on ahead.
Hey, Cam. How you doing?
Good, Steve. How are you?
I'm okay. You mentioned other scenarios. What is there one that you would have preferred to see?
I was okay with 24 teams. I understand, and understood why they kind of landed on 24. I just would have liked it without the round robin for the top 4 seeds is all.
Yeah. And just on the phase 2 portion, is it your belief that everybody's going to be coming back for that? Or are there any players that you may know who are choosing not to come back?
We're just going through that list right now. We're connecting with the players, see what their plans are. Obviously, it's voluntary, so we want to look at when we can get the ice down. I think most of the players, are more interested in getting on ice right now because a lot of them have been off the ice for the longest in their careers, probably in the longest since they started playing serious hockey. So once we can figure out when we get the ice down and get it down, I think you'll see more and more players trickling in. We still have a number of guys that have stayed in the local area. So, like I said, getting back into the facility, getting on the ice, I think, our guys are itching to do that.
Thanks, Cam. Thanks, Steve. We'll go next to Matt Porter. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, Cam. Good to see you.
You too, Matt. Well, I don't see you, but nice to hear you.
I'm here. So I guess to follow on that, do you expect that you'll have a number of kind of NHLers who live in the area, who train here, who might want to jump on? And do you think you'll have space for that kind of thing?
Well, we're going through that right now. We just received the protocol the other day, so we're just walking through it, making sure that we have everything in place that needs to be in place, from sanitizing to temperatures to making sure that the groups are spaced well enough apart so we can clean in between each group. We know, as you all know, it's groups of 6. So we feel we could potentially, by the time we're ready to go, maybe have 3 groups of 6 rotating. But, we don't know the full extent of the numbers just yet for how many guys are going to be here when we've got ice up and running.
Well, next to Mike Loftus. Trying to unmute you, Mike. Just give me a moment. There you go, Mike. Go on ahead. Yes.
Okay. Hi, Cam. How are you?
All right, Mike. You?
Excellent. Just to go back, the round robin, it is what it is, I guess. But you definitely are going into the next round. Do you have a preference on the reseeding or the bracket?
Well, I've talked about it in the past. I think based on how playoffs has gone the last few years, I've kind of been a proponent of reseeding. I think it speaks a little bit more to how successful your regular season was getting into the playoffs, and then we all know there are some upsets in the playoffs, and then to reseed that, I don't know, but I guess right now it's going to be what the players are proposing, and from what I understand, then it'll come back to the board. But at least, like I said, the good thing is there's an agreement of the format right now, and then we'll see how it goes from there.
Cool. Thank you. We'll go next to Joe McDonald. Go ahead, Joe. Your line's open.
Hi, Cam. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
No problem, Joe.
Despite the format and all things being equal across the board, when you look at the potential that this team has to go deep, just what are your thoughts on that potential of this team?
Well, it'll be interesting to see, once we get back up and running in training camp. I know, we've got a group of guys that are very dedicated and committed, and, obviously know where the team was at the pause and what the possibilities were going into the playoffs. Nothing's a guarantee, as we all know, but I think our guys recognize that we had a legitimate chance to, do well and have a deep run in the playoffs. Obviously, our goal all along is to win Stanley Cup, so that goal is not going to change. I think from what I understand and talking to some of the guys, they're anxious and excited. Obviously, they still have some questions and concerns about how this is all going to play out, but everybody still wants to play hockey.
Thanks, Cam.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Cam. We'll go next to Emily. I'm trying to unmute the mic. One moment. There you go. Emily, go on ahead.
Hey, Cam, just wanted to ask just about how you think, there's been some question about, will the veteran status of the team be a help, be a hindrance? What do you sort of think about how this team, as constituted, will be able to take on this kind of a situation, challenge, etc.?
Well, it remains to be seen. Everybody's in the same boat. I would like to think that only because of the experience our players have, maybe some of that experience is going to help them in this situation more so than players that maybe are newer and younger and into the league. But at the end of the day, it's really how well you're going to be prepared, and how well you're going to execute what you have to compete in this league. So, the majority of our players have had a lot of experience in that regard. It's just going to be a matter of, can everything fall into place in a shorter period of time with this long pause?
We'll go next to Mike Petralia. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks a lot, Brandon. Cam, thanks for doing this. Hope you and your family are staying safe.
Appreciate that. Hope the same for you.
We are. Thank you. Wanted to ask you about your coaching staff, and you guys have always prided yourselves on having some of the smartest minds in coaching to prepare your team going into a season. How do you think that will help you, not only in the training camp period leading up to the resumption, but in the playoffs, the unique format itself?
Well, I know how hard these guys work, and how well they work together, and I know that they've been preparing for some sort of playoff in one way, shape, or form since the pause. I know that they've certainly done a lot of video with the teams that we may face as we headed into the pause. So I know that our guys are going to be well prepared. There's going to be plenty of video, plenty of discussions. I would expect the same from other teams, but I know what our group does and how they do it, and how well the players respond to it. So I'm expecting everybody to be ready to go and understand what the coaches want once training camp hopefully does begin.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cam. Go next to Joe Haggerty. Go ahead, Joe.
Hey, Cam, how's the social distancing treating you?
So I can't really hear you well, Joe.
I said, how's the social distancing treating you?
Oh, I've been practicing that for years.
Me too. Are there any skills or attributes you think, not just to your team, but just in general? I know these are uncharted waters, but any particular things about teams, strengths of teams that you think will play out given the unusual circumstances here that might give teams an advantage in this tournament?
Well, I mean, I'm hoping leadership plays a big role of just, once everybody's together and knowing, Bergie, Z, Tuca, Tori, Brad, those guys, they're going to get the others, the others know what to expect from that leadership group, and they know what to expect from themselves and the coaching staff. So, my hopes are that they will recognize that, we're going from a training camp, in essence, really to playoffs. So, which is unusual, as we all know. So I think the experience of having to ramp up that quickly, the guys can lean on the older players for that. Just a little bit of comfort in knowing these guys have some experience, not necessarily maybe in that, but just what it takes to get yourself ready in a short period of time.
And one other, if I can, some people have mentioned maybe, and this goes across all the sports, that, maybe this year there's going to be some asterisk next to whoever wins when you do get started, because it's going to be such an unusual situation. Do you think that's appropriate, and what do you think of that notion?
Well, if it's in a good way, I don't see why it would be in a bad way. We've had shortened seasons, whether it's lockouts or strikes, and I've had Stanley Cup champions, and I don't recall seeing asterisks beside those years. So I don't see why this is any different. The playoff format has changed in the history of the NHL. The number of games per round has changed. So I still think if you're going to have to play 4 rounds and beat those teams, I don't see why there needs to be an asterisk beside the Stanley Cup champion.
We'll go next to Kevin DuPont. Go on ahead, Kevin. Your line's open.
Hey, Cam. Thank you again.
No problem, Kevin.
There was so much to digest yesterday with Phase 1, 2, 3, Star Wars, Warp 5, and the rest of it. But
been talking to Hags about Star Wars?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I bought one of the shirts. But if we could just focus on this first phase, you talked about, sort of rounding up the numbers of guys who are around. Can you just sort of back and fill on the detail of kind of the day-to-day on this first phase? And I'm wondering things like, do players go to their own apartments? Are they going to go to a hotel? How much testing is involved at that level? All the kind of nitty gritty stuff here in Phase 1 or whatever phase it is.
Yeah, whatever phase. Well, right now it's everything's voluntary about what we would like to offer our facility to our players, and it's voluntary right now in this particular phase if they want to have access to the facility. So our job is to make sure that we follow the number of protocols that we have in place to take care of the arena, take care of the cleanliness, take care of the sanitary aspects that you have to, make sure that there's certain things in place for the players, make sure that there's social distancing still taking place while they're in the locker room. And then once we get a handle on how many players want to take advantage of coming in, then we can see how many groups we're going to need. But we're going to follow it to the T to make sure that, but right now the guys, if they come in for the voluntary phase, the majority of the guys will have residences here. So they'll just be coming back and forth from their home, which, from what I've understood, the majority of the guys that are here have been self-quarantining the way everybody should be, and then go to the locker room and enter another safe, clean environment.
So will they have? Will there be testing involved there? Will you have more docs on it? Doctors, medical personnel support.
Well, the testing is really going to ramp up first when we have enough testing to do what we need to do, both at the training camp level and then at the at the playoff or play-in or round robin level, we want to make sure that there's enough testing, but again, not taking it away from those who may need it. But right now, it's we got to be checking on temperatures. If there's any so-called symptoms, then they're not to be around other people or players. The testing right now in this phase is not necessary, but we got to make sure that we're on top of how they feel and what their temperatures are.
Thanks, Dukes. Evan Marinofsky, your line's open. Go on ahead.
Cam, thank you for doing this. Hope your family and you are doing well. Just first for my main question, with the finals regular season games having been canceled, just sort of what's the plan to pay TD Garden workers? And then on top of that, hockey-wise, sort of how do you expect those veterans to ramp up once, the training camp ends and the postseason format gets going?
Yeah, all the information about the part-time employee, game day employee, TD Bruins, that information went out. That was a Delaware North initiative that information is out to them, and they know what they have to do to get the compensation that they would have if they worked those games.
Just a reminder to media, if you no longer have a question, you can go ahead and put your hand down.
Sorry, there was a second part to your question too, I believe.
Yeah, it was just sort of how the veterans, how you expect the veterans to ramp up after sort of the training camp and kind of getting into that postseason form and sort of retaining form.
Well, I think once the drop of the puck happens, it's going to be. I'm going to equate it a little bit to. Obviously you're not playing as many games, but the 48 game season that we had, we felt it was like a sprint to the playoffs. So there wasn't really much of a feeling out process once that season started. So this will be very similar to a degree, not as many games, but there won't be a feeling out process. There'll be drop the puck and we may get a couple of exhibition games in. From what I understand, that's a possibility before you jump right into the play-in and the bye rounds, or the round robin. Pardon me. So, our guys they'll recognize that there's no dilly-dallying here. You gotta be ready to go at the drop of the puck, the first game that means something.
Thanks, Cam. We have time for a couple more. We'll go next to Mick Colagio. Go ahead, Mick.
Hey, Cam. You played the first half of your career when, quote unquote, everybody made the playoffs. And this is the first time since the great expansion of the 90s that everybody makes the playoffs. And I'm wondering if you have any wisdom from being in the league at a time when 16 out of 21 were making the playoffs. And you had, in 82, you had the Vancouver, right before you got there.
Right.
They're 30, 33, and 17 to make the Stanley Cup final. The 91 North Stars, 27, 39, and 14 and made the Stanley Cup final. So upsets, it's way more of a wild card to go deep than it is now, I think. Just because the regular season. Okay, so the regular season is really a grind now. It's become meaningful. The league wanted it for years to make the regular season relevant. Now they're saying, okay, we're going to make this regular season irrelevant. And that doesn't seem fair to you guys. And I'm wondering if just because you guys started the season so fast that you can try to bottle that again and remember that you came back from last June and started so well and try to repeat those steps.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. I think if we were to look back from, where we ended, Game 7 loss to where we finished up at the pause, I think it says a lot about the team and the players and how they prepared in the off season, how they prepared all year. To your point, literally right from the start of the year, for the most part, very, very consistent. So, the hopes are, that they've always looked at we've got some unfinished business. So I assume that that's what they're still thinking about.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We'll go next to Matt Porter. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, I just wanted to know, it seemed like Gary yesterday left it open with obviously so much can change and things can shift over the coming months here. He seemed to leave it open that pretty much anything can be changed, whether it's fans coming back or even hub cities like a Boston being back on the table. What's your understanding of where Boston stands right now as a hub city, and what's your understanding of why it wasn't on the initial list?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think it's just how hard Boston or the state was hit compared to not even just the country, but just globally. So, and where the state is at in opening up, leading into yesterday's announcement, really, there's so much unknown, and that's what everybody's trying to figure out. Which, unfortunately, really, everything's going to be predicated upon the medical community first and foremost of how safe is it, is there a proper amount of testing, and where is the best place to do it. So, as of yesterday, they've identified some cities, states, or provinces that currently are in a better situation. But what I think Gary meant by that, come August, September, things could be better in other cities and locations as well.
Thanks, Cam. We'll have one final question. We'll go back to Dan Roach. Dan, go ahead.
Thanks, Cam. Just a couple logistic things. Two questions. One, players outside of maybe Massachusetts, like Z down in Florida and Pasta and other guys, do they have to come back and self-quarantine for 14 days before they can do anything? But also, how nice is it to have the Warrior facility through this process and being able to be by yourselves in this situation?
Well, it's been a great relationship with Warrior and New Balance right from the get-go. So we management and players and coaches and trainers all feel blessed that we have a facility like this, and they've been great partners. We've been in touch with them on a regular basis about informing them and keeping them up to speed on when we may need ice back down, and they're ready and willing to accommodate as soon as we let them know that. So, not only the relationship's been great, but the size of the facility certainly is going to be beneficial in this situation where we still have to have smaller groups and social distancing.
Great.
And how about the logistic part with guys like Z and Pasta coming in?
Well, like the league said and has stressed, if we're going to have camp by hopefully end of June, early July, if those dates still hold true, there's still going to be a couple-week quarantine period. So, without telling the guys you got to be back, they have to recognize to be ready when camp starts. There's a quarantine period that they got to be aware of, and I think that's why you're seeing Z, for example, making his way back here.